In the past 7 years, NBA YoungBoy has been linked by rumors and speculation to several violent incidents that rocked the hip-hop world. Investigators, fans, and even some of his own lyrics have sparked conversations about whether certain events in Louisiana connect back to the rapper's inner circle. One of the most talked about moments was the 2017 killing of his former close friend, Garrett Burton, better known as G-Money, who was shot outside a Baton Rouge studio. Then there's the mysterious passing of a woman online referred to as TMH Hammers Girl. Stories like these have fueled theories that one of rap's biggest stars might have been moving through the streets like a strategist, while at the same time building a massive music empire. What makes the situation even more chilling for fans is how some listeners believe YoungBoy seemed to foreshadow, reference, or hint at certain events in his songs. That lyrical trail has both supporters and critics asking the same question. Is NBA YoungBoy simply a gifted storyteller describing street realities, or is there something deeper behind the music? The story really starts back in 2017 with what many consider one of the most shocking betrayals in Baton Rouge rap history. G-Money, born Garrett Burton, wasn't just another name in the Louisiana rap scene. To NBA YoungBoy, he was more like a mentor, an older brother figure, and someone who helped guide him into the rap world. To understand how strong that bond once was, you have to rewind to when YoungBoy was just a teenager chasing dreams far bigger than his circumstances. At the time, G-Money was already established inside the TBG crew, short for Top Boy Gorillas. And within that group, he saw something special in the young kid who would later explode onto the scene as NBA YoungBoy. Their relationship went beyond music. They weren't just collaborators, they were practically family. G-Money reportedly let YoungBoy stay at his house, showed him the ropes of the music business, and even appeared on some of YoungBoy's earliest projects. In interviews from those early days, YoungBoy often referred to G-Money as his big brother, someone he respected and looked up to. But the streets have a way of complicating even the tightest bonds. What started as brotherhood slowly evolved into one of the most personal and explosive feuds in hip-hop. The first real crack in their relationship appeared when YoungBoy decided to leave TBG and launch his own movement, Never Broke Again, better known as NBA. For some members of TBG, including G-Money, this wasn't just a career move, it felt like betrayal. But according to several accounts from that time, the tension didn't truly explode over music or money. It was about family. Multiple sources, and later G-Money himself in interviews, claimed he had been involved with NBA YoungBoy's sister. What started as a private situation quickly turned public. G-Money eventually spoke openly about the relationship and even bragged about it, sharing explicit details during interviews. The tension reached a boiling point when their personal business was aired out in the most public way possible. In September 2017, just weeks before his death, G-Money sat down for an interview with Say TV. During the conversation, he confirmed the relationship with YoungBoy's sister and seemed almost amused discussing it. At one point, he said YoungBoy used to call him Big Brother, but suggested fame might have changed things between them. That lyrical trail has both supporters and critics asking the same question. Is NBA YoungBoy simply a gifted storyteller describing street realities, or is there something deeper behind the music? You Shaq's son, I can't kill you.
That line hit like a bomb when it dropped. The message was clear, and everyone in Baton Rouge understood exactly what it meant. The diss record wasn't just music, it felt like a declaration of war. NBA YoungBoy fired back with his own diss tracks, but by that point, the damage was already done. The bond between these former brothers had completely shattered, and in the streets of Baton Rouge, that level of disrespect rarely ends peacefully. What made things even more dangerous was the fact that both sides carried real street credibility and access to weapons. This wasn't your typical rap beef for headlines or streams. It had turned personal, and everyone could feel the tension building towards something darker. Then came September 10th, 2017. Just 2 weeks after the diss track Industry dropped, G-Money, born Garrett Burton, was leaving his regular recording studio on Dallas Drive in Baton Rouge. It was around 1:30 in the morning, and G-Money had just wrapped up another late-night session in the studio. According to witnesses, the moment he stepped outside, gunmen were already waiting. They opened fire instantly, striking him multiple times. G-Money tried to run back toward the studio for cover, but he collapsed in the parking lot before he could make it. By the time paramedics arrived, it was already too late. He was only 22 years old. The killing sent shockwaves through Baton Rouge and the entire hip-hop community. Here was a young rapper with serious talent and a rapidly growing fan base, taking out what clearly looked like a targeted attack. But what made people immediately start pointing fingers at NBA YoungBoy wasn't just the timing, it was everything that unfolded afterward. Within hours of G-Money's death, social media exploded with rumors claiming NBA's camp was responsible. The feud between the two sides had been incredibly public, deeply personal, and very recent. For many people watching from the outside, the timing didn't feel like coincidence. As the investigation unfolded, those rumors started gaining more attention. The Baton Rouge Police Department quickly began looking at individuals connected to NBA YoungBoy's circle as potential suspects. According to police reports and court records, investigators believed Lil Pop was the person who pulled the trigger in G-Money's killing. Authorities also suggested the attack may have been tied to the ongoing conflict between the NBA camp and the TBG crew. At first glance, the case against Lil Pop appeared strong. Witnesses reportedly placed him in the area around the time of the shooting. Phone records showed communication between him and other NBA affiliates both before and after the incident. Even more significant, investigators claimed they had surveillance footage showing someone matching Lil Pop's description leaving the scene shortly after the gunfire. In 2018, nearly a year after G-Money's death, Lil Pop was arrested and formally charged with second-degree murder. But this is where the story took a twist that had people talking across the internet and in the streets. Despite what initially looked like a solid case, things started unraveling surprisingly fast. Key witnesses began changing their statements or refused to cooperate with prosecutors altogether. The surveillance footage that was supposed to be the smoking gun ended up being ruled inadmissible because of technical issues related to how it had been obtained. Phone records that once looked suspicious were challenged by the defense, who argued they were purely circumstantial and didn't prove anything directly. Most importantly, investigators never found physical evidence that directly connected Lil Pop to the weapon or the crime scene itself. What once looked like a slam-dunk case slowly started falling apart piece by piece. Prosecutors suddenly found themselves trying to hold together a case built mostly on circumstantial evidence. By 2021, after spending 3 years fighting the charges, Lil Pop accepted a plea deal, but not for murder. Instead, he pleaded guilty to a much lesser charge, accessory after the fact. Rather than facing life behind bars for homicide, he received a 5-year sentence. And with time already served plus good behavior, he walked free in 2022. That outcome left a lot of people asking serious questions. How did someone beat a case that once looked so strong? Some observers said it was simply the result of skilled defense lawyers and a weak prosecution. Others believed the investigation had serious flaws from the beginning. But in the streets and across hip-hop forums, many people suspected there might be more to the story than anyone on the outside could see. Others started whispering about possible witness intimidation and even evidence tampering. But what really got people talking was how NBA YoungBoy reacted to both G-Money's death and NBA Lil Pop beating the case. Instead of staying silent or showing any public remorse, YoungBoy seemed to address the situation directly through his music. Just 1 month after G-Money was killed, YoungBoy dropped a track called Poor One. In the song, he appeared to reflect on their past friendship, rapping about memories of smoking with G-Money's younger brother and once calling him a big brother. He also referenced the fallout that happened after the situation involving his sister was brought into the spotlight on social media. The track was framed as a tribute to what their bond used to be, but plenty of fans heard it differently. Some believed YoungBoy was suddenly celebrating the downfall of a former ally who had turned into an enemy. And that wasn't the only moment that raised eyebrows. On later songs, YoungBoy's lyrics started sounding even more direct. For example, on Step on Shit, released in 2020, he delivered lines that fans quickly linked to G-Money's killing. The lyrics talked about silencing witnesses and ordering people to move when the word is given, bars that listeners immediately started dissecting online. Another line about throwing a pillow caught attention because rumors had circulated in the streets that G-Money's attackers allegedly tossed him a pillow and told him to go to sleep. It's important to note that police never confirmed that detail publicly, but the reference alone was enough to send fans and internet detectives into full speculation mode. What made things even more suspicious to some listeners was how YoungBoy's lyrics seemed to include details about the murder, where it happened, how it happened, and even the aftermath. For someone publicly denying involvement, critics argued he appeared to know an unusual amount about the situation. Whether those lines were just street storytelling or something deeper became a major debate among fans. The G-Money situation also seemed to set a pattern that would repeat over the next several years. The formula, at least from the outside, looked eerily similar each time. First, NBA YoungBoy would have a serious feud with someone. Then that person would end up dead under suspicious circumstances. Sometimes someone from YoungBoy's circle would get arrested but eventually beat the case or receive a lighter sentence. And not long after that, YoungBoy would release music with lyrics that fans believed were referencing the situation. For critics, it looked like a pattern. For supporters, it was simply a rapper telling stories about the world he came from. But the story didn't stop with G-Money. The next name connected to this deadly rivalry was Quentin Marshall, better known as TBG Quick. His story shows how the conflict between NBA and TBG escalated from a personal feud into something much bigger, an all-out street war that would eventually claim multiple lives. Born Quentin Marshall, Quick was one of G-Money's closest friends and another rising artist within the TBG camp. Unlike G-Money, Quick didn't have a personal history with YoungBoy. His issue was strictly about loyalty. After G-Money was killed in 2017, Quick took the loss extremely seriously. To him, it wasn't just another tragedy in the rap scene, it was personal. And according to people close to the situation, he made it clear he wanted revenge for his fallen friend. Quick wasn't just posting angry messages online either. Sources around Baton Rouge said he was actively applying pressure on YoungBoy's camp in the streets. At just 19 years old, Quick had already built a reputation as someone who would really step for his crew. And from his perspective, letting G-Money's death go unanswered wasn't an option. Throughout 2018, the tension between Quick and NBA YoungBoy kept escalating.
NBA YoungBoy kept heating up. There were reports of close encounters between both camps, constant social media threats, and an overall atmosphere of tension that kept Baton Rouge on edge. Quick, meanwhile, kept getting bolder with his words and his movements. The more attention he gained, the more visible he became, something that also made him an easier target. Then came November 25, 2018. Just over a year after G-Money's murder, tragedy struck again. TBG Quick was at his apartment complex in Baton Rouge when gunmen suddenly approached and opened fire. According to police reports, Quick was hit multiple times and died right there at the scene. He was only 20 years old. Another young life lost in the escalating conflict between NBA and TBG. What made Quick's killing stand out was the way it happened. Unlike G-Money's murder, which took place at a public location where witnesses were nearby, Quick was attacked at his own home. That detail suggested the shooters likely knew his routine and had been watching him for some time. The fact that it happened at his apartment complex made it seem even less random. It looked like someone had specifically chosen a location where they knew he would be vulnerable. Almost immediately after Quick's death, speculation started pointing toward NBA YoungBoy and people connected to his circle. For many observers, the timing seemed too perfect. Quick had been extremely vocal with threats toward NBA, making retaliation appear like the obvious explanation. But unlike the investigation into G-Money's murder, no one tied to YoungBoy was ever arrested or charged in connection with Quick's death. To this day, the case officially remains unsolved, although in Baton Rouge, many people believe they know who was responsible. What added even more fuel to the speculation was YoungBoy's reaction after Quick was killed. Instead of offering condolences or staying quiet, some of his music released afterward included lines that fans quickly linked to the fallen TBG rapper. On a track called Uncharted Love, YoungBoy delivered bars about doing dirty work and leaving marks above the rim. He also rapped about someone who once felt like a brother crossing the line. Another lyric referenced someone losing their life before they had the chance to act. Listeners quickly focused on a line mentioning Fat Boy, which many fans interpreted as a jab toward Quick, who was known for his heavier build. Things sounded even more direct on the song Impact, where YoungBoy rapped about someone getting caught slipping and being killed because they had crossed certain lines, specifically mentioning disrespect toward his mother. Fans immediately connected that lyric to earlier diss tracks where Quick had thrown shots at YoungBoy's family. But perhaps the most chilling reference came in the track Dead Trolls. In that record, YoungBoy appeared to reference Quick's death in a way that many listeners interpreted as mocking his final moments. Whether those lyrics were simply aggressive rap storytelling or something deeper became another heated debate among fans, and another chapter in one of Baton Rouge's most controversial rap rivalries.
In one of the lines, he rapped about someone saying, "Watch the news," which many fans connected to TBG Quick, who had previously told people to watch the news for his next move. The lyric then shifted into a darker tone, mentioning that the person who once said that was now gone, and that two victims didn't make it out alive. Because of how specific those references sounded, a lot of listeners became convinced that NBA YoungBoy wasn't just rapping about street life in general, he was directly referring to Quick's death. Another name that started floating around in the rumors was someone known as Duty Black, a figure people claimed had ties close to YoungBoy. According to Street Talk, Duty Black was allegedly the person who carried out the attack on Quick. The story going around suggested he had inside help, someone who lived inside Quick's apartment complex. That connection supposedly gave him access and knowledge of Quick's movements that outsiders normally wouldn't have had. Duty Black was never arrested in connection with Quick's murder. However, a few years later, he was killed himself. That development sparked even more speculation among people who believed his death might somehow be linked to what happened to Quick. Whether those rumors are true or not, Quick's killing further built the reputation surrounding NBA YoungBoy, a reputation suggesting he wasn't just someone who talked tough in songs. Some critics believed he had people around him who were willing to handle real problems off the mic. Unlike the situation with G-Money, which many saw as a personal feud that spiraled out of control, Quick's death looked more calculated to observers. From that perspective, it seemed less about personal insults and more about eliminating someone who had become a threat to NBA's reputation and influence in Baton Rouge. What makes the whole story even more tragic is that Quick was still very young. He wasn't a powerful street kingpin, he wasn't making huge money from illegal activity, and he wasn't someone who realistically threatened YoungBoy's career. By many accounts, he was simply a loyal friend who refused to let his homie's murder go unanswered, and that loyalty ultimately cost him his life. But the story didn't end there. The third name connected to this deadly saga is True Bleeda. His story represents an even bigger escalation, not just in the boldness of the violence, but also in how public everything had become. True Bleeda, whose real name was Dante Dorset, was a 22-year-old rapper from Baton Rouge and a member of a group known as the Bleeders. Unlike G-Money or TBG Quick, True Bleeda didn't have a direct personal feud with NBA YoungBoy. Instead, he got pulled into the much larger network of alliances and rivalries spreading across Baton Rouge. His crew's connection with groups that opposed NBA reportedly made him a target. To really understand True Bleeda's situation, you have to look at how complicated Baton Rouge's rap politics had become by 2022. The original NBA versus TBG conflict had already fractured into multiple smaller rivalries with different crews picking sides. Violence began spreading.
Throughout the city, the Bleeders were a newer group in the mix, and they had positioned themselves against NBA. Among them, True Bleeda quickly became the most recognizable face and the one with the best chance of breaking into the mainstream rap scene. And the truth is, True Bleeda actually had real talent. His music was starting to gain attention beyond Baton Rouge. He had the charisma, the style, and the potential to take things to a much bigger level. But like many young artists coming out of cities with heavy street politics, separating music from real-life conflicts proved difficult. Instead of staying neutral or stepping back from the tension, True Bleeda became active in the ongoing beef involving NBA YoungBoy. One reason he was seen as particularly dangerous to NBA's side was his connection to people who had issues with NBA Ben 10. Ben 10, whose real name is Kentrell Gaulden Jr., is YoungBoy's younger brother and also part of the NBA circle. In December 2021, Ben 10 and his cousin Marvin Baptiste were involved in a drive-by shooting on Interstate 10 near Prairieville, Louisiana. During that attack, Baptiste was killed while Ben 10 was wounded but survived. The shooting marked a major escalation in the violence. Almost immediately, it became clear that someone had specifically targeted members of the NBA family rather than just random rivals. True Bleeda and his crew didn't waste a second before making their move and letting everyone know about it. They dropped a diss track called Gator Pack, which openly referenced the shooting and even mocked NBA Ben 10 for surviving while his cousin was killed. On the track, one of True Bleeda's associates rapped, "40 Glock, you rapped, heard a Nent stepped on, but they was trying to step on Ben. He felt that fire round and shut down I-10. The meaning was obvious. They were bragging about the shooting that killed Ben 10's cousin and nearly ended Ben himself. This wasn't just typical rap beef posturing. This was a public declaration of involvement in murder. In Baton Rouge, everyone knew the Gator Pack track was a war statement. By openly claiming the hit on NBA family members, True Bleeda and his crew had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. They had killed, then bragged about it in a song. That kind of disrespect, in the streets, usually only ends one way. NBA Ben 10 responded quickly. He took to social media, showing he wasn't scared and signaling that retaliation was coming. Videos surfaced of him with weapons, issuing threats toward the Bleeders and letting everyone know this war was far from over. But this wasn't just personal beef anymore. It was about NBA family being targeted. That meant NBA YoungBoy himself was now directly involved. The retaliation came on February 25, 2022. It was swift, brutal, and public. True Bleeda was at the Mall of Louisiana, one of Baton Rouge's busiest shopping centers, with several crew members. According to witnesses and security footage, they were shopping and taking pics with fans when gunmen approached in the parking lot. What happened next looked straight out of a movie. Multiple shooters opened fire in broad daylight on True Bleeda and his crew in front of dozens of witnesses at one of the most public spots in the city. True Bleeda and his associate Cliff were killed instantly.
Two other crew members, including his cousin Corey, were wounded but survived. The shooters fled in getaway cars, leaving behind a scene that shocked even a city used to violence. The Mall of Louisiana shooting was significant for several reasons. First, whoever carried it out showed no fear of consequences. Pulling off a multiple murder in broad daylight at a busy mall takes either desperation or total confidence in not getting caught. Second, the attack was clearly planned, not spontaneous. It demonstrated coordination, timing, and knowledge of the target's movements. Most importantly, the public nature of the attack sent a message to all of Baton Rouge. NBA was willing to strike anywhere, anytime, regardless of witnesses. Choosing a mall, a place with families and children, showed a complete disregard for innocent life and a willingness to terrorize the community to make their point. The investigation quickly focused on the obvious suspects, NBA members allegedly seeking revenge for the Ben 10 shooting. Several arrests were made, including Demetrian Grimm, who was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. But like so many cases tied to NBA YoungBoy, the prosecution's case started falling apart almost immediately. Key witnesses refused to cooperate, citing fear for their lives. Physical evidence was scarce because the shooters had been careful not to leave traces. And crucially, the prosecution couldn't prove who ordered the hit or establish a clear chain of command linking the murders back to NBA leadership. By August 2022, a grand jury declined to formally indict Grimm due to insufficient evidence, leaving the case officially unresolved. The public nature, the precision, and the lack of accountability cemented the deadly Bleeda saga as another chilling chapter in Baton Rouge's ongoing rap wars. While prosecutors said they would keep investigating and might bring the case back to a grand jury, no one has been convicted for True Bleeda's murder as of 2025. Once again, a case that seemed to point directly toward NBA YoungBoy involvement ended with no convictions. But what really convinced fans that YoungBoy was connected to True Bleeda's death was his musical response. In tracks released after the Mall of Louisiana shooting, YoungBoy dropped lyrics that listeners immediately associated with True Bleeda's murder. On a song called Bring the Hook, he rapped, "Fuck TBG, they all gonna bleed." Fans saw this as a direct shout at the Bleeda's crew, and either a prediction or a celebration of True Bleeda's death. Even more chilling, on another track, YoungBoy seemed to reference the specific circumstances of the mall shooting, enemies being caught in public and making examples of those who crossed his family. The combination of timing and lyric specificity made fans certain YoungBoy wasn't just dropping general threats, he was singling out True Bleeda's murder. What makes True Bleeda's story particularly tragic is that he was just 22 years old, with real talent and the potential to go mainstream. Unlike some of the other victims, who were mostly street figures who rapped, True Bleeda was a legitimate artist. He might have escaped Baton Rouge and built a successful career, but his involvement in street politics and his crew's targeting of NBA family members sealed his fate. The public nature of True Bleeda's murder also marked an escalation in violence. While G-Money and TBG Quick were killed in relatively private settings, True Bleeda was murdered in broad daylight at a busy mall, showing that whoever was ordering these hits was growing more brazen and less worried about witnesses. The fourth name on this deadly list is J.D. Young, whose story is arguably the most complicated and controversial of all. Unlike the previous victims who were clear enemies of NBA YoungBoy, J.D. Young's relationship with YoungBoy was messy, tangled with personal betrayal, romantic drama, and a beef that played out publicly on social media before ending in tragedy. J.D. Young, real name Jorius Scott, was a 24-year-old rapper from Bogalusa, Louisiana, about an hour from Baton Rouge. Unlike the other victims, J.D. Young had real mainstream success, millions of streams, a growing national fan base, and a deal with Atlantic Records. He had collaborated with major artists, making him the highest-profile victim in this saga. The beef between YoungBoy and JD Young didn't start over streets or territory, it started over women. In 2019, rumors circulated that JD Young was involved with Janelle, NBA YoungBoy's ex-girlfriend and the mother of one of his children. The situation was made even messier because YoungBoy and JD Young had previously been friendly and even collaborated on music. But what pushed YoungBoy over the edge wasn't just the alleged relationship, it was that JD Young was bragging about it publicly, disrespecting YoungBoy in the process. Social media posts and leaked texts suggested JD Young wasn't just involved with Janelle, he was allegedly connected to another of YoungBoy's ex-girlfriends, K. Marie. The situation hit its breaking point in April 2020 when JD Young released a diss track called 38K. The track was a direct shot at NBA YoungBoy, with the title itself playing on YoungBoy's 38 Baby project, K standing for killer. It was personal, public, and messy, a deadly combination that would soon spiral into tragedy. In his song 38K and the accompanying music video, JD Young didn't hold back. He made explicit references to his alleged relationships with NBA YoungBoy's ex-girlfriends, even claiming he had text messages showing YoungBoy begging him to stop seeing Janelle. What made the track particularly disrespectful was how specific JD Young got. He rapped about hotel rooms, cities, and intimate encounters, painting YoungBoy as a man who couldn't satisfy his women. In the hip-hop world, and especially in the street culture both artists came from, this is one of the ultimate violations. At first, YoungBoy tried to ignore it, but JD Young kept pushing. He posted on social media, released subliminal diss tracks, and seemed to enjoy the attention the beef was bringing him. What JD Young didn't fully grasp was that he was playing a dangerous game with someone allegedly connected to multiple murders. The beef escalated throughout 2020 and 2021, with both artists dropping diss tracks and trading social media shots. But this wasn't just about music or personal disrespect. It was about respect, reputation, and survival in a culture where those things can literally mean life or death. Things came to a head in May 2020 when YoungBoy and his crew allegedly confronted JD Young in person. According to social posts from YoungBoy, they ran down on JD Young and his crew, forcing them to flee. YoungBoy posted a video claiming JD had abandoned his own people, an ultimate humiliation in street culture.
But instead of ending the beef, this confrontation made JD Young even more determined. He kept releasing diss tracks, posting online, and refused to back down, despite the obvious danger. What made JD Young's situation even riskier was where he operated. Though from Bogalusa, outside of NBA's immediate territory, he frequently traveled to Baton Rouge in areas where NBA had influence. He also didn't have the same level of... He was primarily a successful rapper caught up in street politics he may not have fully understood. The end came for JD Young on July 27, 2022. In a manner as brutal and public as any of the previous murders. JD Young was at his home in Bogalusa with his father when multiple gunmen surrounded the property and opened fire. According to police reports, JD and his father tried to run inside, but the shooters had him completely trapped. JD was hit multiple times and killed on the spot, while his father was also shot but survived. The fact that this happened at his family home with his father present showed a level of ruthlessness that shocked even people used to street violence. This wasn't just a hit on an enemy, it was an attack on an entire family. JD Young's murder was especially suspicious because of timing and method. At the moment of his death, JD was experiencing the peak of his career, millions of streams and major opportunities on the horizon. Multiple gunmen surrounding the house suggested careful planning and resources, pointing toward a well-organized hit, not random violence. Immediately after JD Young's death, speculation turned to NBA YoungBoy and his crew. The beef between JD Young and NBA YoungBoy had been so public, so personal, that when JD ended up dead, many fans felt it wasn't a coincidence. What really fueled the speculation was YoungBoy's musical response after the murder. In tracks released after JD Young's death,
NBA YoungBoy dropped references fans immediately tied to the case. On Chop a Doctor, he rapped about killing someone in front of their family, which listeners interpreted as a nod to J.D. Young being shot in front of his father. On Slameo, he made references to someone dying at their home and even mentioned the number 23, a number J.D. frequently used in his music and social media. But perhaps the most chilling reference came from a leaked, unreleased track called My Life in 2023. Fans claimed YoungBoy rapped, "Jay was my third body, I'm the one who took his life." While the audio quality made it hard to confirm, listeners were convinced that YoungBoy was directly alluding to J.D. Young's murder. J.D. Young's case stood out from the others because of the mainstream attention it received. Unlike G-Money, TBG Quick, and True Bleeda, who were mostly known in Louisiana, J.D. Young was a nationally recognized artist with millions of fans. His death made national headlines, shining a light on the violent undercurrents in Louisiana's rap scene. The investigation into J.D. Young's murder is still ongoing, and no arrests had been made as of 2025. Federal authorities are reportedly looking into possible links between J.D.'s death and other cases involving NBA YoungBoy's associates. What made J.D. Young's story especially tragic was his potential. Young, talented, successful, with a bright future ahead, he chose to engage in a public beef over personal matters, and it cost him his life. His death served as a warning to other artists. In the streets of Baton Rouge, even mainstream success can't protect you from street politics. The fifth and final name on this list is the most mysterious and controversial, a woman known only as TMH Hammers Girl, or the Ops Girl. Unlike the other four victims who were male rappers, this case involves a young woman whose identity was never publicly confirmed. Her connection to the violence is based on rumors, social media speculation, and cryptic references in NBA YoungBoy's music.
And in every instance, YoungBoy released music afterward that fans interpreted as nods to or celebrations of the deaths. This pattern has cemented NBA YoungBoy as one of the most feared figures in hip-hop, not just for his talent or success, but for his alleged willingness to handle anyone who crosses him. Whether these allegations are true or not, they've become a core part of his legend, shaping how other artists and industry figures interact with him. These cases also highlight the limitations of the criminal justice system in tackling organized street violence. Key witnesses often refuse to cooperate, physical evidence is sparse, and prosecutors struggle to tie the murders directly to NBA's associates. The result? Everyone seems to know what happened, but the court can't prove it. From a cultural perspective, these incidents show the dark side of hip-hop authenticity. Alleged involvement in these murders has boosted YoungBoy's street credibility and made his music more gripping to fans who value realness. But that same reputation has come at the cost of multiple young lives, fueling a cycle of violence that still haunts communities like Baton Rouge. The 5 cases also reveal how social media and modern technology have changed street conflicts. Unlike previous generations, these beefs played out in full public view, with diss tracks, posts, and music videos serving as evidence in both the court of public opinion and potentially real legal proceedings. What's especially disturbing is how fans and media react. Instead of seeing these deaths as tragedies, they're often treated as entertainment or proof of YoungBoy's authenticity. This reaction risks encouraging other young artists to see violence as a shortcut to credibility and success. Legally, the implications go even further. Federal investigators are reportedly examining whether NBA YoungBoy and his associates operate as a criminal enterprise under RICO statutes. If they can prove a pattern of criminal activity directed by YoungBoy, he could face federal charges far tougher to beat than the state-level cases that have failed so far. The impact on YoungBoy's career is complicated. On one hand, these allegations enhance his street cred and make him compelling to certain fans. On the other hand, they limit mainstream opportunities. Major brands hesitate to partner, venues are wary of booking him, and streaming platforms sometimes restrict his content.
Most importantly, these cases represent 5 young lives cut short, 5 families shattered, and 5 communities traumatized by violence. Regardless of whether NBA YoungBoy was directly involved in these murders, the harsh truth is 5 lives were lost, leaving a wake of fear and violence that still impacts entire communities. The story of these alleged victims is also a cautionary tale about the dangers of mixing street politics with a music career. Each of these young men, and possibly the young woman, had chances to avoid these deadly conflicts, but pride, loyalty, and the chase for street credibility pulled them into confrontations with someone who allegedly had the resources and willingness to end their lives. When you look at all 5 cases together, a pattern emerges: systematic violence that goes far beyond typical rap beef. If the allegations hold any truth, NBA YoungBoy allegedly orchestrated a campaign that eliminated his enemies one by one, using his music as both a shield and a weapon in the process. The fact that he's allegedly been able to do this while building a hugely successful music career and avoiding serious legal consequences speaks volumes about both his strategy and the failures of the systems meant to stop this kind of violence. Whether it's luck, legal maneuvering, or witness intimidation, YoungBoy has allegedly stayed one step ahead, creating a body count that some say makes him one of the most dangerous figures in hip-hop history. But the most chilling part? How this has been normalized in hip-hop culture. An artist can be suspected of involvement in multiple murders and still thrive commercially, raising uncomfortable questions about society's obsession with authenticity and violence in music. As NBA YoungBoy's career continues and these cases remain officially unsolved, the questions about violence, accountability, and the cost of street credibility remain unanswered. What is undeniable, however, is the real human toll. 5 young lives gone, families grieving, and communities still reeling from trauma. These cases have become part of YoungBoy's mythology, shaping his fearsome reputation and artistic credibility, while also making him a target for law enforcement and a living warning about the dangers of letting street politics overshadow talent. In the end, the story of these 5 alleged victims is really a story about choices. The choice to engage in conflicts that could turn deadly. The choice to prioritize street credibility over personal safety. The choice to use violence as a solution to personal and professional problems. Whether NBA YoungBoy made those choices or not, the consequences have been devastating, and the ripple effects are still felt across the hip-hop community and beyond.
To understand this, you have to look at the gang politics in Baton Rouge. Women sometimes get caught in conflicts between rival crews. TMH, short for Top Hitters Mafia, was one of several crews in Baton Rouge with beef against NBA. The Hammers were a subset of TMH, and like many crews, they had female associates, sometimes romantically involved with male members. Rumors started circulating in 2021 or 2022 that a young woman associated with TMH Hammers was found dead under suspicious circumstances. The details of her death were never publicly released, and local media barely covered it, fueling speculation that her murder was either covered up or deemed unnewsworthy. What made fans connect her death to NBA YoungBoy wasn't any official evidence. It was social media rumors, timing, and references in his music that many interpreted as admissions or celebrations of her death. This case is the most speculative and controversial on the list, but it keeps coming up in discussions about NBA YoungBoy's alleged body count. The rumors about the Ops Girl started circulating hard on Twitter, Instagram, and Reddit, with users claiming inside knowledge about a female associate of NBA YoungBoy's rivals who had allegedly been killed in the ongoing street war. No official reports or credible sources ever confirmed these claims, but fans and street watchers noticed the story fit the pattern of escalating violence that defined the NBA versus TBG/TMH conflicts. What made these rumors feel more real to some was YoungBoy's own music. Between 2021 and 2023, he dropped multiple tracks referencing violence against women connected to his enemies. Lines about making mama cry, leaving daughters bleeding, and other aggressive lyrics had fans connecting the dots to the ops girl. On the track Dead Trolls, YoungBoy rapped about making examples of people tied to his enemies, dropping details that some listeners claimed matched the circumstances of her alleged death. But here's the catch. These interpretations are largely speculative. The lyrics could just as easily have been general threats or references to other conflicts. What makes the Ops Girl case especially controversial is the implication that women, only tangentially involved, could be targeted. While violence between rival crews sadly happens, harming women crosses lines even many street figures won't touch. The lack of verified information has fueled wild speculation and conspiracy theories. Some social media users claim to know her identity or posted alleged screenshots of posts or messages suggesting NBA's involvement. None of it has been verified by police or credible sources. Another troubling element is how this case has been treated online. Many discussions treat her alleged death as entertainment or just another notch in NBA YoungBoy's so-called body count, rather than focusing on the fact that a young woman may have lost her life. This also highlights the broader issue of women caught in street conflicts. Male rappers and gang members may choose this life, but women, whether as girlfriends, family, or friends, often have no say and end up in the crossfire. If the Ops Girl rumors are true, she may well be the most innocent victim in the entire saga. From a legal standpoint, this is the weakest case on the list. There are no police reports, no arrests, and no concrete evidence connecting NBA YoungBoy to her alleged death. It's all based on speculation, rumors, and interpretations of lyrics that could mean anything or nothing. Still, the persistence of these rumors and how widely they're accepted in some online communities shows the impact of NBA YoungBoy's reputation. Even without proof, the moment violence happens in Baton Rouge, fans immediately suspect him. The Ops Girl case also illustrates how street conflicts have evolved in the social media era. Unlike previous cases, which were rooted in documented murders and official investigations, this one lives almost entirely online, in forums, posts, and music interpretations, blurring the line between fact, speculation, and entertainment. This case exists mostly in the world of online rumors and social media chatter. It's a perfect example of how modern street politics and hip-hop beef can spin narratives that may or may not be rooted in reality. What makes all 5 of these cases truly chilling is the pattern they reveal. In every instance, NBA YoungBoy had a public conflict with the victim or their associates. In every instance, the victim ended up dead under suspicious circumstances. In every instance, law enforcement investigations failed to produce convictions tied directly to NBA YoungBoy.